Hi everyone, and welcome to the 11th episode of the Journal Club from the Clinical AI Academy. Today we're discussing a paper with the title Evaluation of Performance Measures in Predictive Artificial Intelligence Models to Support Medical Decisions, Overview and Guidance. So the paper is trying to give recommendations on measures that one can use to evaluate clinical AI models. There are many measures out there. They have identified 32 different measures, and with that, it's very difficult to determine which measures really matter when evaluating artificial intelligence models that support medical decisions. So in the paper, they identify two types of AI predictive tools. One that is diagnostic and one that is the prognostic. The diagnostic one is the one that helps the clinician makes a decision or helps the clinician make a decision at the moment if there is a disease or not. While the prognostic AI predictive tools are the ones that help the clinician to determine if a disease will happen in the future based on the current data. So they suggest that for measure to be effective for evaluating clinical AI models, there are two types of things or two questions to be asked. Is it proper? So they define properness as a performance measure is called proper if its expected value is optimal when using the correct model, which is the model that gives the correct probabilities based on the predictors or features in the model, and if it is focused. So a clear focus on statistical or decision analytical evaluation. So if the model being evaluated shows a clear distinction between statistical and decision analytical performance evaluation of predictive AI models for medical practice. So optimally, the model that is being evaluated should be proper and focused. So it should be somewhere here. Right. So they also suggest that the current evaluation metrics could be categorized in 5 domains. Performance domains the paper referred to them as performance domains. One, that is discrimination. Second is calibration, overall performance, classification, and clinical utility. So they provide a table summary of the measures that they evaluated. And you can see here is the domains, the performance domains, the recommendation, and the remarks on that. And then each row is the measure. So area under the receiver operator curve, in the discrimination, in the calibration, all the measures that they have evaluated, and then overall performance, also the measures that they evaluated, classification, and clinical utility, and the abbreviations of everything that is here. It's in table 2 in the paper, which I will leave the link to in the description. So from all those 32 measures, they found that, for example, in discrimination, what you need to look at is the area under the receiver operator curve. So they recommend including that whenever, and looking at that, if you're evaluating a paper, if you're looking at a paper or a clinical AI tool, see the area under the receiver operator curve. This measure quantifies discrimination, which is a key component of statistical model performance. So if it tells you is the model able to correctly identify if a patient has a disease or not? And it looks something like that. It's a plot of the sensitivity or recall as a function of 1 minus specificity. And if you think about those two terms, you need to look at something called the confusion matrix. So this is if you have the actual condition, if the patient has the actual condition and the AI prediction. So if the patient has the condition positive and the AI says it's positive, that's a true positive. But if the patient has it, so positive, but the AI says it could not identify it, let's say, then it is negative, and this is false negative. So it is a misdiagnosis leading to poor outcomes. And then the negative, if the patient did not have the disease, was negative, but the AI says no, the patient has the disease, positive, so this is a false positive, and this leads to more testing, more costs, and invasiveness. And if it is negative and negative, so if the patient does not have the disease and the model accurately detects that the patient does not have the disease, then this is a true negative. Sensitivity, specificity, recall, and other measures are calculations based on the confusion matrix. From here, then you can plot something. So you can plot the area under the receiver operator curve, for example. So this is for the performance metric discrimination. For calibration, they recommend using calibration plot or reliability diagram. So this measure is the most useful or most insightful approach to assess calibration, particularly when something is used rather than grouping. For internal validation, a plot is preferred, but reporting only the calibration slope is acceptable. For external validation, a calibration plot is strongly recommended with indications of uncertainty. So that is a calibration plot for a model that they used as a case. So this figure 2 in the paper is a calibration plot for the AdNex model using 10 groups of equal sample size and using a Lewis smoother on the estimated probability, which is like a fitting for the model. So it's a function of the observed proportion as a function of the estimated probability, and ideally you want it to be diagonal like this. So the closer the model moves its performance to that curve, to that line, then it is better. And so this is the line described by this smoother, and this is the real data. So this is the fit that they performed, and you can see that it is a little bit far away from the optimal, the ideal calibration. And if you do the calibration, it should go closer, but having this plot gives more transparency on the performance of the model. So it is recommended to have this plot. The next is for overall performance. They recommend plotting risk distribution plots, which is displaying the distribution of the risk estimates for each outcome category provides valuable insights into a model's behavior. So the risk plots looks like this. This is figure number 3, violin and dot plots of the estimated probabilities of malignancy based on the AdNex model. I think the AdNex model is an AI predictive model for ovarian cancer. So this is the estimated risk of malignancy, and you can see that and the distribution of the event and non-event. The event in this case malignant, and non-event is benign. And you can see the dots are the data points. So the model kind of like captures this shape. Is more density here, so it looks bigger around that region where most of the data. So where most of the data are benign. So when the risk of malignancy was low, then this captured it properly, and then when was high, then captured it also somehow, and then you have where it did not capture it. So this is important to have. Then the final measure that so interestingly for classification, before we go to the clinical utility, they don't recommend anything apparently. So for example, accuracy, like classification accuracy, balanced accuracy, F1, sensitivity alone, and specificity, positive predictive value or negative predictive value, classification plots, they are all based on this recommendation, like not essential. And for example, classification plot is neither inadvisable nor essential, so could be presented descriptively, but it's not like a big deal. But the most interesting thing here that they don't advise showing classification accuracy, which is very common right now to see, and it's usually used as a measure that a model is doing well. But these measures, as they mentioned, these measures are improper at clinically relevant decision thresholds. In addition, some measures are hard to interpret. I think we touched on the issue of accuracy, because if you look back at the tutorial where we did the identification, where we built a neural model from scratch to detect brain bleeds, we touched on the issue of accuracy, that it's not very accurate or suitable for using, because then in medicine you usually have imbalanced data sets. So you have very few data points where it's pathological, but most of the data is normal. And then if you just depend on accuracy, the model learns that if it just assigns more to normal, so on average it will be highly accurate. but that does not mean that it learned how to discriminate between pathological and not pathological. So what you need in this case is discrimination, so something like area under the receiver operator curve. So that is interesting, right? Final measure that they recommend is for clinical utility, which is the net benefit or standardized net benefit with a decision curve, and for example expected cost with a cost curve. So this is important because it measures to quantify to what extent better decisions are made. Decision curve of net benefit allow one to show potential clinical utility at various clinically relevant decision thresholds relative to default decisions and competing models. Let's look at how this looks like. So this is a plot of the net benefit and decision threshold. You can have different models here, and then you have different treating strategies. For example, if you treat no one, then you will have zero benefit, not benefiting anyone. But if you treat all, for example, then the net benefit drops, starts like at random, like 50%, and then it drops, I guess. That's how you look at it. But if the model, for example, the AdNex model and AdNex model smooth, then you see that if you use the model to predict the case, to predict or to make the clinical decisions, like for example treat this patient or not treat this patient based on the discrimination of that model, then you will have at the decision threshold of, let's say, 0.4, you have more benefit. You're benefiting like more, like the net benefit is higher than if you treat all patients, right? As we can see here. And then that drops with higher decision thresholds, then the net benefit drops. Let me know if you have any comments, or if you have any comments, or if you think like this should be understood in a different way. I'm more happy to hear from you. So that was the kind of like a summary of an overview of this paper. So they recommend 4 measures, as we have seen. These are the measures that they recommend to look at when evaluating an AI predictive model for medical decisions. For discrimination area under the receiver operator curve, for calibration, the calibration plot, for clinical utility, this net benefit decision threshold, and then the risk for overall performance risk distribution plots. So thank you for joining today, and as always, Clinical AI Academy aims to build and enhance AI literacy for healthcare. Anyone who's interested in AI in medicine or curious about it, from different backgrounds, from different professional levels, from different educational levels, you are more than welcome. And see you in the next one.